This time of year can be really stressful for some parents, and some of that revolves around the fact that we wrestle with if our kids should be going to traditional school or if they should be homeschooled, or maybe they're so young that it doesn't make sense for them to go to school, but many of their friends are. Sometimes the stress on parents isn't so much in comparing, but it's weighing out the benefits of where our kids could be in the future. Today in the Celebrate Kids podcast, in our daily segment, Facing the Dark, we're going to look at one study that is finding that having kids in school earlier greatly benefits them, specifically if they're from a lower income background. Dr. Kathy unpacks the study a little bit, giving some support for some of the perspectives that we do here at Celebrate Kids on child rearing and also the role and influence of parents. And she also helps us think well of our community and the different supports that we can give, especially during school and surrounding the benefit of teaching and training young people. So let's turn now to Dr. Kathy Cook.
Don't be afraid of the dark. Be careful with stars. Not every light is gonna guide you, baby. Not every light is gonna guide you.
So Dr. Kathy, there's a new study that's adding to a growing body of research that's indicating that high quality early care and learning programs can positively impact children for years into the future. But there is one caveat. Children need to be enrolled early. In the studies, they're finding that in infancy and early toddlerhood, when students are enrolled in these early child care programs, they reap incredible benefits. The study was published late last year from the Education Sciences. It's now finding kind of new life because it's been republished in different platforms now this past week. It's found that children who attended Tulsa's EduCare program, all of whom live below the poverty line, experienced positive effects that lasted well into elementary school. The EduCare cohort had attendees for an average of 37 months, and they performed better on all academic measures than their peers who did not attend the program. Parents of the Tulsa EduCare program also reported fewer behavioral problems at home. But one thing they found is there were no statistically significant differences in social emotional development or executive functioning skills between the cohort. Now, Dr. Kathy, it's really important to remember that these students were enrolled at significantly young ages, I would say significantly young, 19 months old and older, right? Until kind of kindergarten, in that time frame. Students from both cohorts experienced similar classroom environments once they entered kindergarten. But by the end of third grade, the EduCare cohort outperformed the control group and scored at the national average for oral comprehension, math, and vocabulary, performing on par with more affluent peers nationwide. This study started in 2010, and they've kind of been following it as they've been going on. Dr. Kathy, many are linking this study to the importance now of starting early childhood education in state-based solutions as young as 19 months. What are some of your thoughts on this?
Well, the first thing I'll say is, my preference would be that parents would parent well and the kids would be at home. I need to say that. Deuteronomy 6 compels me to say that God's design, God's best design for children is that a healthy mom and dad who are married, a man and a woman, are educating and raising and nurturing their children. We have to understand, though, because we don't live in a cave, that that's not always going to happen. And so I am very encouraged, underline it, very encouraged, that these children who were living below the poverty line had the right people and the right program investing in them so that all the way through grade 3, they maintained an excellent academic performance. So it says to me that children born into poverty are capable of learning. When we expose them to the right influences and the right vocabulary and the right books and the right field trips and the right speakers who probably came into these classes and demonstrated fire prevention week and whatever, I can just picture it all. So I'm encouraged by that. It's always been nature and nurture. People ask me, Dr. Kathy, how do people become who they are? Well, it's nature, God's design of us, God's choice for us to be who we are. And then it's the nurture through which we're raised. Was there a mom and a dad and an older sibling? Was there a grandma? Was there a neighbor lady who was a dependable babysitter who loved the kid well and allowed the kid to learn how to take risks? So it is both of those. So I'm encouraged. And I'm also don't want everyone to say when your kid is 19, go enroll them in school. Just do the job at home, right? Do what you can do at home.
Right, Dr. Kathy, I think that's important because it kind of brings up something that I've heard recently about education, specifically with education with kids that are younger, that oftentimes students won't necessarily remember that lesson or that topic that you covered, but that they do remember how they were treated and how they were encouraged to kind of grow in different ways, right? And I think that as I'm reading this study, that's one caveat that I'm kind of taking away from this. What's different about these two scenarios is in one place, they're kind of given this unique care and special attention that's really important, I think, maybe during those formative years. Maybe give me a kind of a perspective then of what early childhood education can kind of do. What is it really designed to do and the purpose for it, especially during those early childhood years and those formative years?
Yeah, it's such a good question because we can do this at home. And in these situations where there was below the poverty line and maybe a single mom overwhelmed with too many kids, maybe they needed support, and the right support caused these kids to thrive. So what is it? It's love, and it's security, and it's trust, and it's identity, and it always will be. Security is the foundation of everything. Can I trust you to remember my name? Can I trust you to remember to pick me up? Will you pick me up when I cry? Will you change my diaper when it's wet? Will you remember to feed me and that I don't like carrots? So it's always about security and trust. And does that lady know me? And is that man safe? And does he hold me right? And is his voice, comforting and calming? And so it's always going to be about security and trust, which means that we love well and we love unconditionally. We even like them, and we fake it if we don't feel like we like them that day. And we give them an identity of I am a learner and I'm loved and I'm capable and I'm wanted here. And I can trust these people. And I'm glad I'm a part of this family. That's foundational. And you know what, Wayne? There are some people listening, or people who could be listening, who are way too busy, who are into money and performance, who are not providing that for their kids. And it's run here, run there. Here's another class to take. Be the best at this. And the kids are believing that it's all about performing. And Daddy only likes me when I perform well. So it's not about poverty. It is about what are your priorities going to be. And I hope that comes across right. I think this is very interesting.
Yeah, I think that's really important to recognize. Like you said, this isn't necessarily about poverty, but that's kind of what they're highlighting here. And it's almost a way for us to kind of say that these programs kind of need to exist. But I do think that there's also some important realities here for different institutions and even places like the church to kind of participate or initiate or engage in different programs to provide maybe support, but also maybe to provide reinforcement for what's happening at home. What would you kind of say to that? What should programs that are offering this kind of early childhood kind of engagement or support, what should they do for kids? And then what does that also then do for families as they look at kind of growing and raising their kids in these different situations?
It's interesting, and not everyone might agree with me, but when we better one person, we better our whole community. So when a church chooses to scholarship in 1/4 of the population for Mother's Day out, you better those families. And the children who paid full fees to be in Mother's Day out got to interact with children different from them, which betters their lives. And I'm using Mother's Day out just as an example. It could be a preschool, it could be a daycare, and maybe there are some families who are desperately in need of support for any number of reasons, generational poverty or situational things that have happened, the death of someone that has made life hard, and we choose to have that empathy and that compassion and the feet and the hands and the eyes and the ears of Christ, and we welcome them in, and we better their lives because we've nurtured them now with loving care, and now the whole community benefits from one less person in need of social services down the road. That's what some people might be thinking about. So yeah, it's interesting. And I think, relevant to the language scores, which is a big thing here, what that says to me, Wayne, is we got to talk and listen more. We have got to go out of our way to talk with our children and ask good questions and develop good conversations, to listen longer, to ask questions that they care about. And one more idea, if you don't mind, and that is to read, and read more to them than you ever thought was necessary, and read above their level. You're doing a really smart thing with your kids where they're reading some books that are a bit advanced and listening to the audible version at the same time. The research says, and it will always say, I believe, I don't think this will ever change, that listening vocabulary is the best predictor of success. listening vocabulary. That means the words that a child understands when she hears them. She might not be able to read them or spell them or use them accurately in her own sentence, but because you've read books, nonfiction and fiction, above her academic level, she's learning bigger words. And this is now what allows her to learn to read and write, because now she's learning to read and she reads a word and she sounds it out and she goes, oh, wait, I've heard that word before. And she knows it's a real word. So read to your kids and read books that they couldn't read on their own, that you think they would enjoy. And that's going to help them develop the language, which is essential for school.
There's a concept that Dr. Kathy closed here with that I think is really helpful, and it's really insightful. That's this idea that when we help out some of the people in our community by providing different resources and supports and encouragement for them to live into the beauty that God has called them to, that it actually benefits and changes our community. It's something that I think James might have been talking about when he wrote in James chapter 1, verse 27, religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this: to look after orphans and widows in their distress and to keep oneself from being polluted by the world. Now, I think this is significant in light of Kathy's words, because James is writing to a Christian community, to a church that he kind of says, your faith needs to have actions. And throughout most of his book, he hammers this idea of watching the influence of the world on ourselves, and also then to live out our faith actively in the world. And in much of this, the way that James kind of approaches it is that it benefits not only the community, but it benefits our expression and understanding of what it means to be fully embodied humans that bear the image of God. And having been redeemed by Jesus Christ, we have an opportunity to live into that in our communities, and not only to image him in our communities, but when we do image him, to partake in the actual restoration of the cultural moment that God has placed us in. It's an amazing and beautiful idea. And I think Dr. Kathy hits the nail on the head here when she calls us to live like that. And I hope that that then is an encouragement for you to be a bright light in a sometimes dark cultural moment in your communities. And I hope it also gives you confidence and courage to educate and parent your kids the way that God has called you to. You know, I want to thank you for listening to the Celebrate Kids podcast in our daily segment, Facing the Dark. We love hearing feedback from you on different topics and ideas that you'd like us to address. Please email me any ideas or thoughts that you have on things that you think we should talk about. You can do that by emailing wayne@ignitethefamily.com. That's WAYNE@ignitethefamily.com. On behalf of Dr. Kathy Cook, I want to say thanks for listening, and we're looking forward to seeing you here again tomorrow.